To kick things off for day 2, we've got Greg Warner. He's a team lead at BAE Systems, and Greg's been working extensively with Atlassian tools for the past 7 years.
Yep.
He's given a few talks on Atlassian tools. He actually was in London, I think it was London, a few days ago, giving this talk to some executives there, and it's a really awesome session. You guys are in for a treat, so without further ado, Greg.
All right, good morning. Anyone here building ships at JIRA? No, not talking to the converted? Awesome. Okay. A little bit about... yeah, I was at Bash last night too. Anyway, a little bit about BAE Systems. So we're a global defence and security company. So there's about 80,000 employees worldwide, and we've got customers in about 100 countries. We work a lot with companies like Boeing on integration type work. In 2013, we had sales about 18.2 billion pounds, which was about 30 billion US dollars or so. A bit about me. I'm the team leader responsible for our systems and software engineering tools within the company. I've been working with Atlassian software for about 7 odd years, and I've had extensive experience with hundreds of software projects over the years. And but you know, it was mostly hardware and software. I never really got involved with things like building ships. So I'm going to take you through the whole story about how this all started. We use Atlassian software across all of our business. So that's within Australia is aircraft, that's electronics, integrated systems, and now our maritime business. So right now in Australia, we're contracted to deliver these 2 things that are called landing helicopter docks. These 2 ships, essentially aircraft carriers for helicopters and troops and contains a hospital. And it's a capability that the Australian government hasn't had for the good last 30 odd years. Last time we had anything looking like an aircraft carrier was back in the 80s. The ship is actually assembled in our Melbourne dockyard, but the hull is built in Spain. So we have a partner that called Navantia who builds the hull. That hull, when it reaches a point, then gets loaded onto a heavy lift ship. That heavy lift ship is something you would usually use for carrying things like offshore drilling wells. So they float the ship, they sink the carrier, and we float our ship on, they pump the water out, and then 3 months later it comes to Australia. This is what it's going to look like when it's completed. So both the 2 ships called Canberra and Adelaide. And yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar program that we're contracted to deliver in the next, like now, and then 12 months from now. To give you sort of an idea about the size that we're talking about, this is LHD in Melbourne. This is ship 1, right alongside a Type 45 destroyer, which is another ship that we build in the UK. But to give you an idea about the sort of things to do on a ship, there are, on ship 1, there's about 16,100 tasks. And on ship 2 at the moment, ship 2 is not as far completed. There's about 4,900 to complete. Now, we're doing those simultaneous at the moment, so there's 2 teams that are working across both ships. But there's a real problem early on about how they would be able to track those tasks through to completion. And when you deliver ships, they have this thing called dock trials. So initially, you just turn the engines on, and you find out are things working. And then when they get to another point, they have harbour trials. So in Melbourne, they'll go around the harbour to check and make sure engine things work. And then when it reaches another critical milestone, then it goes out for sea trials. Now on this ship, we're responsible for delivering 250 systems. So these are combat systems, radar, self-protection systems, missiles, decoy systems, and 1,180 compartments. Those compartments are things like kitchens and small rooms that we might have for military uses. But you've always, whenever you look at these ships though, they've always got a human side to it. And this is one that we identified early on. You're a SQL person, and you're probably one over there. Okay, you're quick. So, there is a beer room, It's interesting, though, because somewhere along the line here, this has been in a requirement spec that's been required, so. All right, so let's get down to the problem. So, when this ship was in Spain, and the heavy lift ship arrived, you book these ships 2 years in advance. And so when that heavy lift ship arrives, you can't say, well, can you just wait until we complete all these things before we put it on the ship, on this heavy lift carrier and send it to Melbourne? So, in the wisdom, to be honest, we have a team in Spain whose role was to identify all that work that hadn't been completed, that needed to be completed when it arrived in Melbourne. They used the best tool that was at their available to them at the time, which was Excel. And that resulted in a spreadsheet that was 6,400 rows and 78 columns wide. All right, people can understand where we're going here. And when it got to Melbourne, it was growing at 250 rows a day. Now, that equates to 476,000 attributes being mapped in a spreadsheet. Okay, so I said I've worked with hundreds of software projects, and I was in Sydney working a totally different project, and my boss gives me a call and goes, I think they've got a problem down in Melbourne. Can you go down and give them a hand? Having worked with hundreds of projects before, done plenty of migrations, I've walked down caught the flight to Sydney, walked in, gone, how hard can it be? And there is this 27,500 tonne ship, 240 metres long, sitting outside their door that they're worried they're not being able to be delivered. And so every morning at 7 o'clock, they would have this status meeting where they would find out, how we're going along the ship, how's the completion going. Every morning, people were talking about this spreadsheet and how much pain it was to go through, all the tasks are in there, and how we're going to meet these key deadlines, how we're going to meet the build-to-dock trials, how we're going to meet the harbour trials and sea trials. And it was a real big concern. And what was happening was that spreadsheet was being sent out to lots of other teams in the morning who would then update their bits, and then it would come back in the evening, and a person would spend 80 hours a week merging it back together. Clearly not sustainable, right? And within BAE, we have this thing about work-life balance, and that was clearly not heading in the right direction. So every morning, this team's going over and over again, and that's how we got involved. So I've gone in and said, okay, where are we up to? And they've shown me the sheet that took minutes to open. And I thought, that's not a good sign. And we said, okay, what are you going to need? And we said, well, we need to fix that multiple spreadsheet problem. So I said, okay, so you're after a collaborative multi-user system. I said, okay, we can do that. Okay. They said, well, we've got lots of these spreadsheets. These aren't the only ones. There are different teams working on different bits. There's a team working on getting the paintwork finished. There's a team working on getting the insulation done. There's another team that's just identifying other bits and pieces that need to be completed. And so we need to bring those all into the one system so that our entire project team, like 900 people, can all see what's going on in the ship. We needed to automate some of the appropriate common tasks because they said there was a lot of data errors that were occurring. So something where someone would go down into a compartment and they'd mark all the things that need to be done, they'd mark the compartment number down, and then later on they'd find that compartment was completely wrong and they have to go and refine all that work. So I was being able to do some automation on that. We have an overall policy about how we deliver systems, and it's always about we've got to configure, not customize. This system is going to be reused in the future, and it's going to be shared with both our software teams and those doing planes, aerospace investigations. So we need to make sure that whatever we do for this project doesn't affect those others. And 4 weeks. You've got 4 weeks to do it. Okay, all right. So it's growing at 250 rows a day. So this 4 weeks was determined that do all this migration, all this automation and integration work so that we can cut this problem off so that we can start to meet our contractual deadlines. So I've thought, well, you know what? We can probably do this in JIRA. And my team is largely familiar with JIRA because we've been supporting it for like 7 years. I thought, well, it is multi-user, and said, it's got all these aspects that I could see in the requirements we're already starting to meet. I was confident that there was already an 80% requirement fit based on those things, but I was a little bit concerned about there's probably some unknown regarding shipbuilding that I don't know about yet. But I had a bit of a concern that, is JIRA going to work in this use case? Like, it's sold as a software tool, and we've used it for task tracking, but we're building ships. How hard is it going to be to get to fit in? And can we deliver in that 4 weeks? So that's pretty tight. And we were kind of being pushed pretty hard to say, well, what do you need? What resources do you need to make this work? So what I did is, I left that site and I was sitting in the airport lounge in Melbourne, and on the back of a beer coaster, after several beers, I was starting to write, well, we probably can do it, but you probably need to make a few phone calls. So first phone call was to a contact at Atlassian saying, this is what we're going to do. Do you think this is going to work? And I said, maybe. And I said, I don't need maybe. I need like yes, no. And I said, I think you'll be all right. It's okay. That's fine. And so we have a services partner we work with. So I rang them as well and said, look, this is what we're going to need. Like on day one, we need 2 reports. These 2 reports are so that we can issue work to our trade workforce. So it looks like a purchase order. And another one was to get some financial things signed off so that whenever we identify work that needs to be paid for, that we can issue that to parties to go ahead and approve. So they said, yeah, I think we can do that. And then we talked about automation. I said, probably not day one, but going to do some automation. And we'd never done any of this before, never done any integration to any other system. And I said, yeah, we can do that too. And I said, well, I've seen it in the the Atlassian support portal, there are things where it can retrieve your support entitlement number. So I had an idea that that stuff may be possible for us. So we got, tick up for that. And yeah, then we started thinking, well, once we start this, it probably starts to make sense if we can retrieve it from some of our enterprise systems, like our ERP system and our other partners' databases, where configuration information about the ship's going to be stored. But then it was also, well, this isn't a software project that we do a release and it lasts for a year. This thing's going to last 30 years. So we've got to think like the longevity about how we're going to look after this data, how we're going to do any archiving, but also when these ships get delivered, we want to be the company that's going to be responsible for the through life support. That's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So those are the sort of things we're thinking about early on. But a ship isn't software, so there's no real way that you can just take your existing system, give them a open, in progress, resolve, close workflow, and that's going to work. So we had to start to speak to people about how do we build ships, and that's probably the first thing we did is understand. Tell me what to do. And there was this phrase we kept hearing time and time again was, we've been building ships for 35 years, we know how to build these things. Like, yeah, I understand that. And I might be the young guy here, but we're trying to make sure that we can all get through this and get this delivered. So first up we said is, let's identify the workflows, because that's going to make you happy if we can streamline and derive some efficiency during the day. We had to identify the key issue fields. That spreadsheet, that's 78 columns wide, were all the fields that they needed to track the ship through to delivery. So we had to identify, of those, which ones do you need and which ones will we no longer need, but which ones are critical to delivering a ship, because the fields that we had in the system were software specific. We had to identify the customer reports, to talk about those 2 customer reports we had to build. And then we decided that the best way to stick to the configure, not customize, is to extend using JIRA add-ons. And that way we knew that when this project was delivered, we could probably pull those things out and keep using that same system. So how do we do it? Well, straight up, we said, you guys are going to be using the system, you guys are going to be using the system, sketch out what your day looks like today. And they told me, oh, no, it's only 2 or 3 steps and we've done this. No. We've got a whole room of whiteboards. Use the whole lot. Tell me how it works, because we've only got a short time frame and you've got to be straight up front and honest with us. And so, we had them sketch out the whole day. That sketch of the workflow fundamentally became the translation of straight into a JIRA workflow. We've got an truly established business process system within the company worldwide about how we deliver software and how we deliver all these sort of things. But it was their day that we didn't quite have that, they're going to use it day to day, let's make sure we get this right. But then we had to collaborate on that workflow. It went back and forth a few times. We'd sketch it up and then send it to them, and they'd say, oh, that's not quite right, and there's probably some assumptions, so it's important to collaborate on it. But also, there were quite a few steps within the workflow that were Excel steps, because they were using Excel, and so they had steps that they would do during the day because that's what Excel did. And so we had to make sure that any time these things were sketched on the workflow, why is that one there? And you had to be really, really prudent about exactly what we're going to do. So to give you an idea, that's what one task looks like. So that was just one thing they were doing during the day. And there's comments in there about updating a cell green and changing this column red and things. All those were Excel steps. And so I went through every single part of that, all the fields they update, and there's even like down the bottom left, there's like cell AC and cell AE and stuff. Can you imagine how much of a pain that's going to be to look after? So that was quickly identifying, okay, I can think we can see some things already. So that workflow on the board translates to that workflow in JIRA. How easy is that to follow? And even then, there's some things there I'd like to take out, but that's where we finally agreed is how it's going to be. So we have tasks that come in from our completion team. So they've identified a scratch that needs to be corrected. So it comes in, it's open, it gets verified. We use the components within JIRA are actually trade groups. So we usually have components like database or user interface. Those are actually things like paint, insulation, systems, so that when a task is created, it automatically goes to the team lead that's responsible for all the paint work on the ship. So they'll verify. And the reason we do that is so they know that today there's all this grey work paint being done. If I've got some other ones, let's group them all together. So we do a verification. It gets printed to for our trades, and then we just track it like we would in software. On the custom field side, you have to identify those fields that matter. And just like we were going through with Excel and identifying Excel steps, we identified the fields that they had in Excel for tracking. So they were using Excel to do the reports of how the work was being completed, and they used it for macros. But they had lots of duplicated fields, and even in some cases, it would be a column that would be equal to some other column because that's Joe's column and this would be his Bob's column, and those sort of things going on. So we had to identify those fields that matter, but don't directly import all the fields from Excel. And that's probably the biggest thing I can give you today is that Just don't blindly import them. Just make sure that they make sense, they're no longer redundant, because that will be an absolute nightmare later on to maintain. But one of the things we found, though, is that custom fields, we were looking at 78 odd fields in the end, plus or minus a few, but I had one of my support guys going through creating them, and he was creating the custom field, and he was adding it to a project, and then he was adding it to a screen. I thought, it's got to be a fast way to do that. And at this point, I've been dodging the REST interface for a while. We actually used the Jelly Runner to do it. So the Jelly Runner is available. It's in the admin console. It's a very structured way to do it. And so turn it on if it's not already on within JIRA. It's a Java option when you start it. And you write files like this. And in this case, we're creating the location on the ship, port and starboard. And so the field name is ship location. It's a multi-select searcher, a description about what it's going to be for the field name. In this case, we're just going to do the scope as far as project key, custom field, and then the values. And down the bottom, put it on the screen. So that text file, we actually eventually created as a configuration, so that if we ever want to build anything like this before, you just paste it into the Jelly Runner, hit run, and it executes that for all your fields. So if you ever want to do like a real fast way of building custom fields, that's the way to do it. So then, to actually do the migration, we ummed about this for a while, about how we're going to do it, whether we're going to use like the REST, and I've been dodging it for a while, but I thought, why don't we just do the way that we know now, which was to use the CSV importer. But what it did mean, though, is that many trial runs, because we had the configuration, that Jelly Runner, that talked about what type of field it's going to be, whether it was going to be a string or be an int. Well, we actually verified that when we would parse the Excel file using, we actually use Python to do it. There's a CSV reader module. And we would check to make sure that, okay, the field you say is going to be an int, are the values that we're getting from that also ints? And we came across thousands where this wasn't the case. And we would feed that back to our project team saying, look, in our configuration it doesn't match, what do you want us to do with this field? We can do something else with it, we can change the field type. But yeah, many trial runs until we got to a point where it was around 95%. So that's close enough, and then there will be some things that will be faster to modify once we get it into JIRA. And when I mean faster, it's using the bulk edit instead of having to do it in Excel today. So parsed that CSV, gave the errors back to the project team. They fixed them up so that daily their data was getting slightly better until we got to a point where we said, okay, now it's good to go. But we now use the REST for everything else. So things like creating components, we use the Python JIRA client to do that. But one of the things early on we found that we worked out well is, like now these days it looks so simple, is use JIRA to deliver your JIRA project. So we created a JIRA project within sort of the first couple of days that had everything that we were working for this project team to deliver, that we were going to deliver in this migration. And it meant that we could start to onboard those members early on. They start to get an idea about a very simple JIRA project that we were collaborating on. They understood what create issue was. They understood what edit issue was, rather than having to wait until day one when this thing went live, when they had to get familiar with the system. So yeah, we use JIRA to deliver JIRA project. Always deliver your training. I'm always worked in the technical field, and I couldn't understand, maybe they're just going to get it. But no, we had a change person that said, no, let's deliver the training. So we used the Atlassian University training early on, and then added some customized training. And so as this system was being built, we were delivering screens to our training team to say, look, can you start to take 5 people, 10 people start through this training so they're familiar with it when it comes on live. All of our knowledge and reference guides were in Confluence, bit of a no-brainer. But one thing we did, though, is when we imported from Excel and we were creating the fields, we actually gave an output back to the team with all their current columns plus one, which was the now JIRA key that matched up to all those tasks. So that if there was a sheet that was floating around somewhere and someone said, well, what's that issue in JIRA? They actually just clicked on the hyperlink and it sent them straight into JIRA. So we used that as like this transition period for a week so that people could know the old and the new. But yeah, we also imported other references as well that were specific things that someone might have added some column. We came across columns that people added late in the migration, Bob's column, and so we imported those as custom fields and left them around for a while, and then eventually just pulled them off the screens, and people didn't notice. On the custom reports, so the 2 mandatory reports on day one were just identified, saying that's got to be in the system. We looked at whether we could develop them. We're a software company, and we thought, well, we could probably spend some time doing that. We thought, the lead time's so short, and although we've got really capable developers, their time is better spent delivering value to the company rather than building this. So we actually decided that it's cheaper to have an Atlassian partner build them for us. But one thing with that is that we work in sprints. So this 4 weeks became 3 sprints. And we had to make sure that our sprints were lining up with their sprints. So that as the partner was building their stuff and we were building our stuff, that it would pop out at the end. And it was like just-in-time manufacturing for cars, that everything would be ready on day one. Early on, we were a bit out of sync, and we could see that was going to be a problem, so we just corrected that really early on. But yeah, we delivered the custom reports are delivered as a plugin, so that later on when we don't need them, we'll just pull them off, and they won't appear in the dashboard summary for future projects. So the other part of it, so we broke down this into these 3 phases, and phase 1 was to deliver the migration and the 2 custom reports, and that would give the project the same capability they've got today and not impact them. Then phase 2 was reserved for automation, and phase 3 was this magical phase about stuff you don't know yet. And you know, when I deal with like our commercial procurement people who typically base on statements of work and define requirements, and I have these 3 airy-fairy phases, and they were kind of like, you can't do that. I said, well, we're going to have to, because we could spend the next month defining all the requirements and get them, and we'll still get them wrong. We really need to get this thing out the door. And it was really someone from our maritime business unit rang me and said, you just deliver your 80%, and we're confident that you'll manage the risk to get this thing done. So, so phase 2, we talk about retrieving data from and automation, which is coming out of our Oracle ERP, as well as some other custom databases that our suppliers have. We used marketplace plugins as far as possible because we knew that was the quickest way to get this thing going. But yeah, we did have a custom plugin that retrieved data from other databases using JDBC, and it would be for transitions during a workflow, so that when you create an issue and you put in the compartment number, it would go and retrieve the compartment number, the compartment description, its location, if it's part of a group, if it's part of a system, so that we could populate as many fields within JIRA from the create screen as we could. And also making sure that you retrieve issue on edit actions. So early on, if you edit an issue, it wouldn't update. So we would say, well, yeah, when you hit edit, that's really a stale issue. So now it needs to refresh with any new information that's in our partners' databases. So what does it look like? Well, we have a top-level project. No surprises there. Then below that, we'd have 2 issue types, whether it was a system or a compartment, so that when we did our issue lookups, we knew which data to get. And then below that, there was simply subtypes. No one here's going, wow, because it's not. And these are just subtasks that we've added over time. CCAs, compartment completion acceptance, BDTs, builders doc trials. We let the project define these, and they had a lot when it was in Excel, and we just narrowed it right down to what they need for delivering these 2 ships. That's what it looks like today. So, you know, I had to find the one that was least covered by export control. 2 hooks in a toilet. So, along came Go Live, and you know, I'm thinking it's a big ship, it's a big project. I'd already had this guy Kelly ring me, he's a big American guy, and he's like, whatever you do, it's got to work. And I said, if it's not working, keep trying harder. It's got to work, because there is no going back. And so I remember that phone call vividly in my mind. So we went Go Live, and it was on a Tuesday morning after a long weekend, and silence. There was crickets. And I was like, wow. So we had to make some phone calls. Are you guys using it or what? And said, it's all going okay. And I said, you've given us exactly what we asked for, which is 2 reports and the same functionality we had in Excel, and things being issued to trade workforce. No one's being held up. We thought, okay, that's good. But we still made sure that we had contacts who were just listening what was going on to make sure that it was, you know, well, I was expecting some sort of tsunami to come, you know, to be honest. You know, you think all things can go wrong. And yeah, they just said, no, it's okay. We're just keeping an eye. There's some, you know, some small things about how to do this and the workflow, but by and large, generally pretty happy. So we have 0 service desk calls, which we thought was cool. We only got the calls in the next week after they'd started to use it and said, oh, can we tweak this a little bit? Can we change that screen a little bit? So yeah, day 1 was largely a success. And we met the thing with 0 defects, which was do the import and don't screw anything up. That's pretty much how I can summarize it. And we did that. And there was 0 impact to that trade workforce. They kept working, so the project team was able to issue new work to the tradies to go and do more paint work. Tradies are colloquialism in Australia, that's a person, a tradesman. To go and issue the work, and that was all going on, it's getting resolved, everything was looking okay. But if I can give you one big tip, and I'll talk about the 4 weeks that I was given, the 4 weeks was also implied by me, because my wife was 36-week pregnant. And if I can give you one tip, don't have your daughter on the go live date. Yeah, so my wife had a maternity bag by the door, and my laptop and crypto card right next to it, and we're going to the hospital like, oh, of all the days. Anyway, both were a delivery success, so we're fine. So, so I can give you an idea about what happened to the project. What the sort of things we did was issue creation before and after. So before, it took the project team 10 minutes to create an issue, where they would go through Excel and they would manually create it, to after, which was 2 minutes. So that was, that's looking pretty good. Queries that we would get from our partners. So if work had been raised to be completed, and it would go to one of our partners for them to pay for it, then they would query, was it really needed? Where's the photo evidence? Where's the engineering diagrams? This would take them an hour to go and collect all that up and say, well, this is all the stuff you need to know to approve it, and they would go approve. So that was 5 minutes. They would get a phone call from one of our suppliers. 5 minutes later, they had to return, here's all the engineering information that we need. Can you please go ahead and approve? So massive, massive, massive return for them. As an interest, when we looked at how much we spent to do the migration, if we'd done nothing more after this, we'd get it back on data entry alone. So we spent about $16,000 on consulting in that 4-week period, and we returned $190,000 in labour savings in the first 3 months. So if we did nothing else, we were already winning. So significant reduction in the manual errors because we use that automation. So you type in compartment number, it retrieves the compartment description from our databases. That worked really well. There was a massive increase in the confidence of the integrity of the data because now the charge codes were correct. Like before, they were just manually entered. And quite a few times, the tradies would go and do some work, they'd come back, and the charge codes are wrong. So then someone's got to find those charge codes. But now we were forcing them through our ERP system so that when we were responsible for the work, using our charge codes, someone else responsible goes and gets different charge codes, that was all 100% correct. And a much happier workforce because they can now get on with the job. Like we had this, there's a strategy within the company that says, we're going to secure our shipbuilding future. And this project team is now working towards delivering exactly that. And we send out lots of surveys, and usually we have technical surveys about, is this faster, is that slower, and how's this? But we get these sort of things come back, which was, I'm able to get home before the sun sets. And this is shipworks control. So this person was the choke point for all the work that comes in that he would issue, right? This guy's working 80 hours a week. And he's like, probably my biggest opponent to start with, to be honest. We had all these conversations about intelligent numbering and this and that's got to be unique. And I said, look, we can have the JIRA key. And he'd come up and saying, I've been building ships for 30 years. But to have an impact on him, on his day-to-day life, was enormous. But it's not just like those people on the ground. And we had lots of these that came back like this thing that's making the life easier and we're delivering on the ship and it's all looking good, was you always got to manage up as well. And so like my boss was saying, whatever you're doing, just keep doing more of that. I don't care what you're doing. Like my boss is saying it's fantastic and we're hearing good things on the ground. So whatever you're doing, just keep doing more of that. And it's good. Once you start delivering these sort of projects, people start beating a path to your door. And I'm looking at my mailbox last night and we've got 8 more ships that want to get on board with this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's good when you have good projects like this. So what else did it do? Well, we've had 60,000 hours that have been tracked through JIRA in the last 12 months. So we've also got another 40,000 man hours that have been tracked that are work for our partners. It also means that our partners want to have access to the data that we've got within JIRA so that they can also have the same efficiency. We're all co-located and we're all in this together to deliver on this thing. But what does it do? Well, that's why I'm here, is that it saves the company $5 million. Now, you're never going to go to a conference where people are going to send you there to tell how you lost $5 million. They'll tell you if you go to save $5 million. And I'm on the end of the last little leg of a world tour. I've been talking about this sort of work because this is 100% reusable in our business, but in your businesses as well. This is just a data migration. There's no big thing about it. But it's kind of what happened after that. So we really had our maritime business unit who was telling me, you got 4 weeks to deliver. We decided on 3 phases. That was just agile. They were telling us to do agile. Well, once we delivered on this and started to hit the savings, then they looked at where else could we use this? This isn't just, if we can deliver shipbuilding, if we deliver aircraft, what else can happen? And of all the places that started to pop up was in our production engineering, like people that are cutting steel. They would start to raise tasks about work they were doing on the ship. So on the ship, someone would say, can you build me a trolley to go down this hallway? And so what they'd do is they'd create a task within production engineering saying, can you build this? The production engineering team would do a sketch and share that back with the people on the ship, and then they'd build these things. There were complete linkages between them. We're also contracted to deliver these blocks for these ships in Adelaide, where I'm from, and we do these dimensional controls. We do the measurements compared to what was in the engineering diagram to what we're delivering, and they too now use JIRA to do that. So they have a dimensional control project that has some workflow validators that identifies things like rework. That's all done within JIRA. So what really happened is Maritime, who were our smallest JIRA users of all the company, are now the biggest users of it. Lots of projects, lots of links between projects, so they can all share. And one of the reasons is that they're based in many locations in Australia. So probably the big ones is Sydney, Melbourne, Perth. And there's dimensional control work, so there's work where they do measurements, where they share that across both sites. And they're able to start to share their workflows. And it was really good to see those teams start to come together. And that's some of the people side of this that you don't necessarily think about when you do this type of work. So then it was, okay, well, we're only just getting started. So we delivered on those 3 phases. And over the last 12 months, we've delivered another 200 enhancements through to them. Like once they'd started to use JIRA and they can see the automation they can get from it, they're saying, well, now we need this. And wouldn't it be awesome if we could identify every compartment in the ship that has one thing left to go? So we wrote a report so that they could then choose 5, 4, 3, choose paint, choose whatever you want to do so that they can actually get those reports and nail some of those things really quickly and get them signed off. But then it was, okay, well, this ship is getting ready for delivery and we're going to do ship 2 at the same time. Well, then let's think about how we're going to do warranty, because warranty is in our contract. So we thought, warranty's not too different to how you would manage support requests for a software project. So couldn't we use something like JIRA Service Desk to do that? And that's exactly what we did. So we're using JIRA Service Desk. We're providing that back to our defence customer, the Navy, to log warranty calls against the system. They can also request investigations, which we then share with our partners, so our partners can use JIRA Service Desk as well. We also reuse much of the automation, things around components and the lookups into databases, all done through JIRA Service Desk. But it also means that we can link the Service Desk tickets, like warranty requests, through to the JIRA as-is delivery information. That sounds like software, doesn't it? So where we had all the compartments, and we've got photos, and we've got all the work we've done, well, the warranty manager can actually look and compare and say, we delivered like this, and now it looks like that. Let's have a look at whether we're actually responsible for that. But also, we also had some other plugins. So, well, we deal in a world of export control. ITAR, which is International Traffic and Arms Regulations, as well as Australian eyes only, and those sort of things. Could we get JIRA to do that for us as well? Because for every ITAR infringement, that's $1 million. And so if we can start to identify that within JIRA, we could. So again, on the phone with services partner, said, yeah, piece of cake. Well, so we did, and it looks like this. So when you logged an issue, it has a field that talks about, is this covered under export control? If it is, then it goes and looks up the information about it. So in this case, a TAA is a ITAR export control license. It just says, the issue you're about to look at is covered under TAA 125.472. We can enforce that through group memberships if we want to, but at the moment we're just identifying very much at the top level issue. This is what you're about to look at. Below that, we've got the SLAs. This is just standard JIRA Service Desk that we're using with this plugin. Very, very simple. And then we use the things like the security schemes to then enforce whether we share it with our partners or not. Don't necessarily want to share the dirty laundry all the time. And then we can change that so that once things have been to a certain point we want to share it, we can. But what we did though with Service Desk was to start with the customer experience expectations. We said, what do you want our customer to work with? Like, how do you want it to look? Because we can build you a really awesome technical solution, but how do you want to do it? And they just said, look, it can't be $19.99. And within our office, we actually have this poster that is Prince's album cover of $19.99. It's like, whatever we deliver, don't deliver that. And we start with that and say, look, it's got to be single syllable, fat crayon, make it really easy so that they have more to do with us, so that we have this ongoing customer relationship on delivering these things, so that the work that we can keep securing the year is based around this customer experience. The transition was really easy because they're already using JIRA. We'd work with them to deliver JIRA for the completion, like the compartment completion. Now we're talking about Service Desk. They just kind of got it. I'd reserved this whole morning to take them through it, and they just went, yeah, we've done it before, that's easy, off we go. So transition was quite easy. But now we find it's used everywhere. So we used it across maritime. We're able to use it for delivering revenue streams for other products now, where we used to just sell this hardware product, and then that'd be the end of it. We might hear customers when they want to buy a second one. Well, we said, things we're doing on the warranty management with SLAs and KPIs, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't sell some sort of service-based contract with those things now. And that's what we're doing. So JIRA Service Desk enables us to then generate this extra revenue stream. So I guess probably the key takeaways I can give you is that JIRA is actually surprisingly easy to integrate with your enterprise systems. I was a bit skeptical when I first started this. I thought, I've been part of a lot of integration projects and enterprise things over the years. I thought maybe it can do it, but it wasn't. When you look at scale of things, Oracle's this big and JIRA's this big. How's it going to work? But surprisingly easy to integrate. I can't summarize enough, but say that reduce as many of those custom fields as you can, especially on import, because those things are going to be around for years, depending on your system. And we'd considered whether we would provision a new system to just do this work, but Now, if you just go through those import and just reduce them right down, massive improvement. Massive improvement in performance as well, because you have to import each one of those fields, and that takes a while too. To give you an idea, those 6,400, that was over the space of like a day. Just allow yourself plenty of time, because large imports will take a long time. We would do like the first 10 and check them, and then the next 100 and check those, and then 1,000. But it takes a long time, surprisingly long time. Glad we had a long weekend, and glad my wife hadn't quite started labour. But yeah, work with your customers on their workflow, because that will make them happy. Like, you don't realise that, you know, reducing those number of boxes is going to make it really easy for them to move across, and by having those points where they can get confused, yeah, just make it really, really easy for them. We've done that on the service desk side as well, because we don't train the Navy how to use this, but we're responsible for giving them support. So remove as many of those as you can as possible. Definitely make them happy. So thank you for listening, and listening very carefully with my Australian accent. And open to Q&A if you'd like to do that.
Thanks, Greg. That was awesome. We do have time for a couple of questions, and I know that y'all have started asking some in Confluence questions, so thank you for doing that. So, Greg, the first question we have for you is, how many people does it take to maintain JIRA as its usage has scaled up?
Okay, so yeah, we have had to add more. So my team is 3, and then there's 3 support, and we used to be me and another and maybe 1 on support. So what we actually do is, instead of having to support other systems, now we get them to support JIRA instead, to be honest. So we actually haven't expanded it, we've just changed the mix. But yeah, it's 3 people work on development, and there's 3 people on support, and that's for 2,900, to give you an idea. But we're now having to sort of get some business analysts involved as well. Like, we used to do all the workflows. Now we say that would actually be better off if we have an analysis team, which we do have, to sort of do some of that stuff first, so that when the work comes through to us to build it, we just work on their diagrams they've generated for us.
Awesome. Thank you. With all the success, what's been the biggest challenge to adoption you faced since switching to JIRA?
The biggest challenge is actually delivering on expectations now, to be honest. This one gets sort of put up there as like that's the be all and end all. We had to do a lot of work to get there. So the biggest challenge now for the adoption is, can we deliver it in a time frame they want? And we've got some people now that have been waiting for a month for us to get to it. That's actually a big challenge for us to get there. So we're looking at automation, using partners to do some of the work, like some of the heavy lifting instead of us. But generally on a whole, what we're seeing is usage of JIRA within our company is going up, and usage of other products is going down. So while you've got happy people and you're delivering on the right things at the right time, and we include that in our agile sprints to make sure we're delivering on the right projects, that's generally okay. But yeah, not big challenges for a user community, big challenge for us to deliver it timely.
That's awesome, though. That's, I think, kind of a good sign, right?
Yeah.
That you were that successful. Yeah. So how did you train people? JIRA versus workflow training, small groups versus large groups? Okay, so how we do it today is a bit different how we used to do it. So we use the Atlassian University training to get people an idea about creating issues, resolving what a workflow looks like. We used to deliver that, and we just thought that that's not really a high-value thing that we can do. Like, that's kind of chewing up time that we could do building things. So we use university training for the early on training, and then we have some training that kind of extends that says these are BAE specific things you need to be aware of. We have this life cycle management that we need to know. These are the key steps you need to know about. This is how we have issues built up. So those things is how we do training. We generally like to stick it to small groups, about 6 people at a time, because 6 people is just the right size for you to engage with them and get an idea about where they're going. If you go any bigger than that, then you start to lose a few people, because people will just say, well, this isn't applicable to my business unit, and you're not looking at my use cases, and so they lose that engagement. So yeah, instead we do small groups of 6 at a time and do as much online training as we can before we actually get into the classroom. Awesome, thank you. Do you use JIRA Agile, Kanban boards, or to provide a visual overview of your progress, or do you even use JIRA Agile at all? Yes, so one of the big changes actually happened. So I work in like corporate IT, and it was Maritime that prodded us to go Agile with this one project. Well, then that actually resulted in Agile going from 1 team to 18 in 12 months, because they could see you could deliver this stuff. And so we use Agile across all of our teams. Teams that are delivering things like ERP financials and ERP HR and supply chain management, even commercial and procurement have all their stuff like this. And we share where we're up to using Kanban boards. That LHT group that we talk about, we have a board that shows all the things they're asking for, so all of their new requests or where they're progressing along, because it meant that we didn't have to keep giving them status updates, and just said, look, go have a look at the board. The board is where we're up to today, and we also have things on there that are with our
external suppliers. So anything that we've given to an Atlassian partner is on the board as well, so they can see what's us and what's someone else, and they get an idea about why we're waiting on certain things. But yeah, you have to be straight up front and honest, because don't hide it away, because it's going to come back and bite you. And that's why we've been able to deliver on these 200 increased requirements in the last 12 months, just by sharing the boards with them. And there are things on the board that are right down the bottom, and people get why they're on the bottom, because they have no value and they can see the things at the top. So yeah, we share that with everyone now. We're much more open than we used to be, and we've kind of learned from, when you deliver it in 4 weeks, you kind of don't really have a choice.
Great. So how do you set task order and dependencies for such a large effort?
We don't set them. We actually get them, like our customers, to set them, because we're delivering to them, right? And the way that we can deliver the biggest value back into the organization is delivering on the right things first. And so when I talk about those things about the migration, that was non-negotiable. They wanted that. Then they wanted their 2 reports. They even said, if you can't deliver on those 2 reports, which one to deliver first? And after that, it was people coming up with ideas about, well, we could do this better and do this better. I said, well, you just put them all into our project, and then we'll talk to you about it every week, and we'll make sure that we're delivering in the right order and we're taking them off the top. Years ago, when I used to work in corporate IT, we'd be a little bit insular, and I used to say, some people don't even know the business is out there. We used to deliver the wrong things all the time, and you just can't do that when you're working like this. And we're there to support the business, and within the Australian business, there's another $60 billion worth of shipbuilding work in the next 20 years to win. And the only way we can win that is be successful in current contracts, and we can support the business doing that by delivering those right things first.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more. So let's see, what marketplace plugins did you decide to use, and maybe tell us why you chose those?
So we use some enhanced workflow plugins, so to copy fields on transition. So one of them was they wanted to know when something was issued to production. So they would say, go and build us this thing, and then we'd issue it to somewhere. And they said, well, the easiest way we can do that is just to copy the updated field, like the timestamp. So we just copy that. We use Vertigo SLA, because we use that for our KPIs. What else do we use? We got Glyphy, because we had to draw a lot of stuff. What else off the top of my head? Yeah, they're kind of the big ones, I think. But yeah, usually they're generally workflow plugins that we just add in as validators and custom fields. We use the enhanced mailer plugin as well, because I think it's called JEH something. It's enhanced mailer. What it means is you can work with people who aren't in your system. So we wouldn't have every account within JIRA for our external parties, but our parties would email us. So the way we do that is actually copies the email address from that party as a custom field, and then within JIRA you can just mail that custom field email address, so they would get the comments. So they don't need to be a user in your system, and that's how we could work with parties who didn't have direct access systems. So it's the JIRA Enhanced Mail Handler, I think it's called.
Cool, thank you so much. So big round of applause for Greg. Thank you so much for being here this morning.